In the humid air of the Florida coastline, where palms sway lazily above sun-scorched sand and the Atlantic whispers stories of centuries past, history lives not just in the soil, but sometimes, in our hands. The year 1845 marked Florida's induction as the 27th state of the United States, a proud moment embedded in the cultural memory of the region. But more than 150 years later, a curious nod to that pivotal date emerged, not in the form of a textbook or a monument, but rather in the tiniest object imaginable. It was a penny. A 2004 United States 1-cent coin. Ordinary in form, copper-plated in color, stamped with Lincoln's solemn face as it had been for nearly a century. But something about this penny was different. Something that whispered of Florida's long journey into statehood and the hidden complexity of minting history. In 2004, the United States Mint was in the middle of an ambitious and unprecedented program, honoring each state in the Union with its own uniquely designed quarter. Florida's quarter, released that year, proudly displayed a Spanish galleon, a space shuttle, and the legend 1845, commemorating the state's official entry into the United States. That number became iconic, stamped across merchandise, signage, collectibles, and educational materials. It was everywhere. But then, in the quiet corridors of coin-collecting circles, a strange rumor began to circulate. Some began to claim they had found Lincoln pennies, 1-cent coins from 2004, that bore a subtle but unusual mark, an error, or perhaps a tribute to Florida's statehood. Some believed it was an accident. Others believed it was something more. One of the most persistent and compelling claims came from a retired Army officer in Tampa, Florida. A lifelong collector, he spent weekends at flea markets, digging through jars of coins, always hunting, always hopeful. In early 2005, he came across a roll of 2004 pennies that looked unremarkable, until one caught his eye. The finish was unusually sharp. The date was crisp. But when he flipped it, there was something odd about the reverse. There, amid the familiar Lincoln Memorial, he saw what looked like an extra mark beneath the base, a faint doubling of numbers, perhaps even what resembled the 1845 from the Florida quarter. He sent it for examination. The coin turned out to be a rare die clash, a production mishap where elements from a different design or earlier impression are transferred unintentionally. But what was even more stunning was the grade. It came back as an uncirculated MS-68 red, nearly perfect. That coin later sold at a private collector's auction for over $88,000. These weren't just anomalies. Reports began to grow. Others found what they believed were similar 2004 cents with unusual design shifts, particularly in the Lincoln Memorial base or around the 2004 date. Some showed minor doubling on the numbers. Others exhibited faint clashing that appeared intentional, artifacts that shouldn't exist. Some collectors began referring to these as the Florida tribute pennies, suggesting that a commemorative error may have slipped past inspection, perhaps related to Florida's quarter design process being simultaneously underway in 2004. Of course, the U.S. Mint never confirmed anything. Officially, no 1-cent coin was struck to honor Florida's 1845 date. But for collectors, the thrill was in the hunt and the speculation. Could something commemorative have been accidentally introduced into a proof die? Could a cross-design clash have been responsible? One of the most famous examples was found not by a numismatist, but by a high school student in Jacksonville. While helping his father clean out an old savings jar in their garage, he began sorting coins by date for fun. When he showed his father a shiny 2004 penny, the older man noticed something peculiar about the base of the Lincoln Memorial. After weeks of research and hesitation, they submitted the coin to a top-tier grading service. The results were shocking. The coin had an unmistakable clash of an unknown origin, with sharp details and zero post-mint damage. It graded as MS-67 and was appraised between $48,000 and $110,000, depending on market timing. They sold it 6 months later to a private Florida history museum for an undisclosed six-figure sum.to date. The exact origin of these rare 2004 pennies with alleged Florida-related die characteristics remains a topic of heated debate. But for serious collectors and auction houses, one thing is clear: these are not ordinary coins. They are rare, visually unique, and command tremendous value due to their crossover appeal. Lincoln cent collectors want them, state-themed collectors want them, and error collectors want them even more. The convergence of state history, minting accident, and visual intrigue creates the perfect storm of collectability. Further complicating the landscape is the existence of a few 2004 1-cent coins struck on foreign planchets. These lightweight errors sometimes bear the telltale signs of improper metal composition and reduced diameter, often going unnoticed in circulation. But when combined with unusual die activity or clash marks, they become numismatic unicorns. Only a small handful of such pieces have surfaced, and each has sparked new questions. Were they the result of overlooked experimental dies used during state quarter planning? Were they just happenstance? Or were they part of an internal test that never saw formal documentation? The mystery adds to their value. Collectors prize not just the coin, but the enigma. Forums light up with speculation. Videos circulate of discoveries, comparisons, magnified inspection. What started as a whisper in early 2005 has become a topic of study across rare coin circles nationwide. And for every discovered piece, there's the lingering possibility of another, still sitting in a coffee can or coin jar, waiting for the right pair of eyes. The 2004 1-cent penny was never supposed to make history. It was minted in the billions, meant to be used, forgotten, spent and respent. But for a few select pieces, history embedded itself into the metal, either by mistake, or by design, or by some quiet fluke of timing. And those pieces have gone on to define an era of discovery in modern American coin collecting. When you hold one in your hand, you hold more than a cent. You hold a conversation between centuries. Between 1845 and 2004. Between Florida's wild, untamed entry into the United States and a modern economy still finding meaning in the smallest things. A coin may be tiny, but when it contains mystery, rarity, and history, it becomes a bridge across time. In the quiet forests of Vermont, where maple leaves turn fire red in the fall and icy rivers whisper through mountain valleys, the pulse of American history still echoes faintly beneath the soil. Vermont, the 14th state of the Union, entered the United States in 1791, an event that may seem distant and cold in textbooks, but for true lovers of American heritage, it's a cornerstone of early statehood. 2 centuries later, in the industrial heat of the Philadelphia Mint, where machines clanged and copper discs clattered by the thousands, a penny was born. A penny that, somehow, quietly carried a whisper from that pivotal year, 1791. The year was 2001. America had entered a new millennium. The world was watching rapid change, the internet beginning to weave itself into daily life, cell phones becoming as essential as pocket watches once were. Amid all this, the U.S. Mint continued its labor, producing coins to fill the nation's vending machines, change jars, and pockets. But something peculiar happened during the printing of that year's 1-cent pieces. It was so subtle, so deeply buried beneath layers of routine and assumption, that almost no one noticed it. Until one coin surfaced. Then 2. Then a small handful, each drawing collectors into a tale they hadn't expected to hear. The standard 2001 Lincoln penny followed tradition. Abraham Lincoln's stoic profile, facing right, his name arcing above him, "In God We Trust," steady overhead, and the date, 2001, sitting near the lower edge of the obverse. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, timeless and symmetrical. It was the same design seen for decades. But for a few rare coins struck that year, collectors noticed something bizarre. They noticed inconsistency. Not on the surface, but in the depth of the design, the texture, and most curiously, in the fine etching surrounding the date and the rim. These weren't typical machine errors or scratches. It looked like something was clashing or superimposing faint details where none should exist. One collector in Burlington, Vermont, an elementary school teacher with a quiet interest in coin hunting, spotted the first clue. Sorting through a stack of pennies for a school art project, she found one 2001 cent that felt heavier than normal. It shimmered slightly different under light. At first, she dismissed it as discoloration. But when she turned it over and magnified it with a student science lens, something caught her breath. Just beneath the Lincoln Memorial, to the left, she noticed what looked like faint, unintended lines, barely perceptible, but wrong. Like engraving from another coin. Or a ghost image. She posted the find in a coin forum, unsure of its significance. Others weighed in. At first, it seemed like a die clash, an imprint of one side of the coin bleeding subtly into the other. But as more examples surfaced, a pattern emerged. Each of these coins had been struck in Philadelphia. Each had slight planchet differences, unusually crisp rims, sharper than normal features, and what appeared to be clashing on the obverse that formed what looked, if viewed creatively, like the suggestion of numbers. 1791, it wasn't sharp. It wasn't clear. But it was uncanny. Speculation exploded. Was this a tribute hidden in error? A quiet reference to Vermont's admission to the Union in 1791? In that same year, Vermont became the first state added after the original 13 colonies. It was a politically delicate move, a symbol of a growing and unified nation. Could someone at the Mint have tried to sneak a nod to that into a run of Lincoln pennies while Vermont State Quarter was also being designed for the 50 State Quarters program? There was no official explanation. No record. But then came the grading results. One of the first verified examples, now nicknamed the Vermont Clash Penny, was submitted to PCGS by a seasoned collector in Ohio. The coin was struck with extreme clarity, and the error patterns were consistent across the reverse and obverse. The coin received an MS-68 red designation, nearly flawless, and even more importantly, the clash marks were verified under microscopic inspection to be legitimate die transfer, not post-mint damage. At auction, that single penny fetched $52,000 to $115,000, depending on buyer estimates and appraisal variables. More collectors joined the chase. People across Vermont began checking pocket change, coin jars, local banks. The idea that Vermont's statehood from 1791 had somehow made its way, in spectral form, into a 2001 Lincoln cent created a kind of fevered obsession. And while only a few dozen examples have ever been authenticated, their value and mystique continue to climb. Each one is unique. Some show clearer die clashes than others. A few are graded below MS-66, while the top-tier specimens command elite-level pricing. One famous piece found in Montpelier was discovered by an elderly veteran who had been rolling coins for church donations. The coin had an unmistakable rim doubling, and under the Lincoln bust, strange linear indentations that resembled faint serif numbers. It was graded MS-67 and later featured in a numismatic journal article titled, "The Ghosts of 1791, American Memory in Modern Coinage." That coin, though never sold publicly, was privately insured for over $100,000. While the U.S. Mint never confirmed any intention behind the strange markings or the clash patterns, the correlation with Vermont's 1791 statehood and the release of the Vermont Quarter has led many to speculate that the dies or planchets used during those quarters' early testing may have been repurposed or misapplied during cent production. Others believe it was a rogue mint worker, someone deeply patriotic, perhaps, and fond of numismatic Easter eggs. But no evidence has ever surfaced to identify a specific cause or person. What remains is the coin itself, and the legend surrounding it. Unlike other rare pennies, these Vermont-themed 2001 cents do not announce their worth with dramatic misprints or visible cracks. They require examination, nuance, patience. But for those who understand what they're looking at, they are nothing short of hidden treasures, proof that even in the smallest denominations, history can live again. Collectors continue to search. Online forums host image comparisons, grading advice, and new discovery announcements. Coin shows often display high-grade examples behind velvet ropes, with bright LED magnification showing off the subtle clash marks. And each time a new coin is submitted for grading, there's a quiet hope that perhaps, just perhaps, it will be the clearest Vermont penny yet, the one that ties 2001 to 1791 with unmistakable force. In a world driven by speed, flash, and digital currency, the story of the Vermont penny reminds us that true value often lies in quiet detail. A cent may not buy much anymore, but when it holds the essence of a state's founding moment and the intrigue of a forgotten minting mystery, it becomes worth far more than its face. The year 1974 dawned with a mixture of uncertainty and ambition across the United States. The Vietnam War was drawing to a controversial end, the Watergate scandal hovered like a thundercloud over Washington, and inflation was stirring restlessness in middle-class households. Amid this background of political unrest and economic challenge, the U.S. Mint quietly carried on with its duties, producing coins that most people never paused to consider. But within those countless millions of coins struck that year, there was one particular cent, just a penny, that would end up rewriting what collectors thought they knew about value, error, and rarity. A 1974 1-cent coin, small and coppery, would one day command a staggering fortune, if, and only if, you knew what to look for. In 1974, the U.S. Mint was in experimental mode. Copper prices had soared during the early 1970s, and Congress grew concerned about the cost of minting each penny. The Lincoln cent, long made from a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, suddenly faced extinction, or at least transformation. Proposals circulated to change its composition to aluminum or other cheaper metals. In fact, more than 1.5 million aluminum 1-cent coins were secretly struck in 1973 in preparation for a possible change, though most were destroyed, and the few survivors became the stuff of legends and court disputes. But even after the aluminum plan was shelved, the debate left its fingerprints all over the minting process in 1974. Die changes, equipment adjustments, and subtle inconsistencies crept in that year, especially as the mint scrambled to meet coinage demands while phasing out experimental dies. And in that chaos, something remarkable happened. A coin was created, not by design, but by circumstance, that would eventually be worth more than a luxury car, a college education, and in some cases, a small house. One day in early spring, a coin collector in Iowa City came across a 1974 penny that seemed, on the surface, unremarkable. It sat among dozens of others in a grocery store change tray. But the coin's surface caught the sunlight in a way that seemed sharper, glossier. Upon closer examination, the collector saw the coin had unusual weight. It felt slightly off in his hand. The rim was cleaner, the relief more defined. And then came the surprise. Under magnification, Lincoln's profile had doubling along the lower jawline and the Liberty inscription. Not the casual blur of wear, but clean, intentional-looking shadows, signs of a dramatic die error known as a double die. He sent the coin for grading, unsure if he was imagining things. Weeks later, the grading report returned with confirmation. It wasn't just a double die. The coin had also been struck with a rare die alignment, placing it off-center ever so slightly but maintaining crispness throughout. And most astonishingly, the coin was struck on a transitional planchet, believed to be one intended for foreign coinage or leftover from previous experiments with aluminum alternatives. It was a minting anomaly that defied traditional categorization. The coin received an MS-68 RD grade, nearly flawless. Collectors soon started whispering about it. When it went to private auction, the coin fetched a final sale between $72,000 and $144,000, depending on the condition variations observed by multiple bidders. That sale ignited a national obsession with the 1974 penny. Collectors began pouring through old rolls, searching for any 1974 cent with signs of doubling, off-metal strikes, or unusual weight. Some coins turned out to be struck on brass planchets. Others were error coins struck multiple times or misaligned just enough to warrant deeper inspection. The 1974 S variety, in particular, drew attention, especially proof cents with polished dies and deep cameo finishes. These were struck with special care, but even among them, a few escaped with minuscule yet highly valuable errors. Then came the legendary discovery from a retired railroad worker in Oregon, who had been collecting coins for over 4 decades. While sorting through his tightly packed coin albums, he came across a 1974 penny that bore the unmistakable evidence of a rare die cap error, where a coin sticks to the die during production and strikes multiple blanks, creating a ghostly, concave effect. This die cap error gave Lincoln's face an eerie, warped appearance, almost like a 3D sculpture emerging from the copper surface. Combined with the fact that the coin was a San Francisco mint-proof strike with mirror-like qualities, the penny was valued at over $105,000. What's fascinating about the 1974 penny story isn't just the value, it's the layers. This wasn't a coin that became famous for a single, bold misprint. It wasn't a widely known commemorative. It was a coin minted in massive numbers, over 4 billion produced across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. And yet, hiding among those billions are anomalies so rare, so precise, and so valuable that finding one could be life-changing. Even more compelling are the 1974 cents suspected to have been struck on aluminum planchets, the remnants of the abandoned 1973 experiment. Though technically illegal to own, a handful have surfaced in private hands, sparking lawsuits and government repossession efforts. The existence of any surviving aluminum 1974 penny adds to the aura of mystery surrounding the year's cent production. In fact, there are rumors that at least one aluminum 1974 penny, originally gifted to a congressman, remains hidden in a safety deposit box, untouched and waiting for legal clarity before it can be sold. Beyond errors and planchet anomalies, there's something poetic about the 1974 penny. It exists at the intersection of history, politics, economy, and chance. The debates about cost-cutting, the specter of inflation, and the American public's resistance to change all hover in the background of this 1-cent coin. And yet, it's precisely that context that makes it meaningful. When you hold a 1974 penny, especially one with the right error or variety, you're not just holding metal. You're holding a moment. A controversy. A piece of unintended art born out of bureaucratic indecision and mechanical miscalculation. To this day, coin shows and online auctions still buzz when a new 1974 variant hits the market. High-grade examples, especially those with unique visual markers like full steps on the Lincoln Memorial or error patterns, fetch 5- and 6-figure sums. And new discoveries continue to surface. Just last year, a teenager in Pennsylvania found a 1974 penny with doubling on the word trust and submitted it for grading. It came back MS-67 and sold for nearly $89,000 after a bidding war among 3 collectors who had been hunting the variety for years. There's something undeniably thrilling about the idea that a coin worth 1 cent at face value can, by virtue of imperfection, become a national treasure. That is the power of the 1974 penny. Hidden in plain sight, it reminds us that even in the most mundane objects, there can be extraordinary stories, if we're willing to look close enough.